It's 4:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am Jason Danielson with TerraSky. I'm joined with a couple of our customers, Michael from Milrose and Alex from Western Union, as well as our sales engineer, Tony. So today we're going to give an introduction of our product SkyVisualEditor and talk through what it can do with Visualforce pages, and then give a couple of actual discussions of what some of our customers have been able to do using Visualforce to really maximize the Force.com platform. So before that, Dreamforce, right? It's really overwhelming. There's a ton of stuff going on. How you guys doing? It's day 2, pretty tired, you know? What's going on? Lots of new announcements. It's very exciting. So we think that this is a perfect opportunity to sort of evaluate where you are with your Salesforce implementation. Think through, are my users using it? Are they getting the most out of it? Think through, what are some new projects that I could do with it using some of these new technologies? And so just keep that in mind as we go through some of these discussions, because we think this is the perfect opportunity. So before I get into the presentation, we are in booth 2133 of Moscone North. So if anybody has to leave partway through, please do see us at the booth. We'd be happy to go through individual discussions and get into more detail about your particular use case. But TerraSky is the company that makes SkyVisualEditor. A little bit of background of us. We have our U.S. headquarters is based in Menlo Park, California, and our international headquarters is based out of Tokyo, Japan. We have been around since 2006 as an implementation partner for Salesforce, and we have since worked our way up to be the #1 partner in Japan with over 1,500 Salesforce implementations. And through all of those various implementations, we've built up a big library of best practices, which over the last 2 to 3 years, we have taken and turned into a couple of our products. SkyVisualEditor, which we'll talk through today, and we also have an integration platform as a service product called Sky On Demand. But just some of our numbers here, we have about 80 of each of the certified engineers, as well as 2 technical architects on staff. A couple of our customers, you can see like Toyota, Milrose, and Western Union with us today, Fujitsu, Coca-Cola. So we've been involved with a lot of the major implementations, not only in Japan, but also expanding from there throughout the rest of the world. Our studio is just a drag and drop studio. At the very end, Tony's going to give a very simple demo of that. But you can see on the left-hand side, just right in the web browser, you get a list of all of your fields and everything specific to your org, and then all of our components that will allow you to rearrange and make pages however you want. On the right-hand side, then, you see just a couple examples of some of the pages that our customers have been able to make, ranging in complexity and style. So with that, I'd like to pass it first over to Alex to talk about how Western Union has worked with SkyVisualEditor. So Alex?
Thanks. So my name is Alex. Obviously, thanks so much for having me, TerraSky. I'm really enjoying being in the west coast of the US. I've never been to this part of the world before. The only difficulty I've been having is nobody seems to be able to understand a word I'm saying, so especially in shops. So I hope you can all understand me. I think it's because my voice, the English accent's so sort of dry and flat by comparison to the gorgeous kind of Californian accent over here. You guys seem to be able to pack in about 5 vowels into even simple words like you. How are you? I seem to have managed to kill the deck. Okay, super. So I'm here to talk about Western Union, Salesforce, and TerraSky, obviously. So I've been working on Salesforce anyway with Western Union for about 3.5 years, during which time we've seen the local tool transform from kind of tracking sales leads in a couple of countries to really becoming the kind of one-stop shop for all of our kind of sales activities and processes across the EU, covering lots of business functions. So as well as sales, we've got finance in there, operations, legal, compliance, HR, and so on. But it's really the sales part that's still kind of the core of the tool. That's what we kind of put most of our energy into. So obviously Western Union moves around kind of $82 billion for our customers every year. And the vast majority of that comes from consumer-to-consumer transactions. So we do that through our network of about 500,000 locations in around 200 countries. And it's that network which is kind of the most important thing to Western Union. So when we're trying to be competitive in the marketplace, it's really about protecting that network and trying to grow it and gain market share. And it's that process which we've really focused on in our Salesforce instance. So we've got two kind of core types of business. Well, I mean, lots of different types of business, but sort of two sales processes that we work on. We've got our kind of small businesses like kind of sole traders running one location businesses, and then we've got big networks like banks, post offices, big retailers like supermarkets. And when we're trying to sell to the bigger networks, the business needs to get approval for, they need to get a business case approved. And that's traditionally been basically an Excel file that's been put together by finance. It shows financial ramp-ups over several years across different dimensions, and it's passed around by email. And basically, once that's done, the sales rep just goes into Salesforce and goes, okay, that milestone's been passed. And what we wanted to do is take that and move it digitally into Salesforce. So both the financial data and the approval process itself. But what we quickly realized was the big challenge in doing that was Salesforce's user interface. So I guess you're all pretty familiar with this. You know, it's kind of uniform color. You've got two columns of fields on the screen. And when you're talking about displaying financial information in a way that's easy to read, this kind of display doesn't really get you anywhere. So you want to compare kind of lots of different dimensions, you know, like a kind of matrix view where you see different years, different dimensions. This kind of view, it makes it very difficult to read that kind of data. But locally, for our Salesforce instance, we didn't have any kind of in-house developers. The tool was basically owned by sales. I'm just an admin. And we needed to find a way of creating a good user experience, which didn't require lots and lots of coding. So luckily I remembered about this email that I think Salesforce sent me about a month previously that sort of showed this kind of Excel-like grid. And I dug it out, and obviously that's how we found out about SkyVisualEditor. So the SkyVisualEditor Studio, this is how it looks. And basically this is a page builder, you know, and it uses the kind of drag and drop metaphor or whatever you want to call it, a bit like basically the way pages are built inside Salesforce. So you take components like a panel grid component, for example, which you can see there, and you just drag it onto the page. You can adjust the properties of it, for example, the column width, how many columns and rows you have, and then you add further components onto it in layers. So you can add all of your different fields just into the grid itself as kind of input fields, and you can label the columns, you can color code it using HTML color codes, whatever you want. Obviously, there's other components, lots of other components. So you can add more like traditional sections to the page, but obviously because it's Visualforce, you can have more than 2 columns. So you can have 4, 5, 6 columns if you want to. Another thing that we did, we used Conga Composer. So we wanted to add a button to the page, which allowed us to merge that data into an Excel if needed. So in order to do that, we just used the custom button, which they have in the tool, and we added a like a kind of nugget of JavaScript code, which kind of called that Conga function, which you can kind of type in to the tool. And what SkyVisualEditor does is when you deploy the page, it writes the Visualforce page for you, sort of that code. It writes the Apex controller, and any code that you've got that you've kind of added in like that, it will just kind of integrate it into the page for you. So this is kind of the end result. Obviously on the Salesforce side, you just have a few clicks to set it up. You have to kind of adjust your actions so that they point to the new pages, like when you click new, for example. And you know, you can see we've got multiple columns of fields, sections are color-coded, and we have that Excel-like grid where you can see year on year on year what was the performance across all of these different metrics. It also integrated very well with our approval process. So we use the Salesforce approval processes tool to trigger approvals within the tool. That worked very well. And what we found was that the time to review and complete kind of approval of the page was reduced by around half. Although that's just to do with how much we were able to kind of make the page more compact and readable. And I think actually probably the adoption advantage is even greater because, like I said, the previous view was kind of a non-starter. I think it's really important to remember that obviously just digitizing or putting a process into the cloud isn't an end in itself. You always have to ask the question, is what we're giving our users better than what they had before? And this is really what the tools allow us to do. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Alex. And then next I'd like to introduce Michael Richardson of Milrose, who has taken it really to the extreme of what you can do with Visualforce. So, Michael.
There we go. Hi. Yes, I think this is a really interesting contrast. So I'm coming from New York and sort of representing the business-to-business side of the world, and a whole different approach, a different spin to applying the Force.com platform. So I'll talk to you a little bit about who is Milrose to give you a little bit of flavor for that. Without reading the slide here, how many people here have ever lived in a house or apartment or worked in a building? Anybody? Okay. For the rest of you, my apologies, but what Milrose does is essentially help anybody that's either building or modifying a structure get that job done better, faster, cheaper, and with higher compliance and better safety than any other means. And so operating in predominantly the large urban areas along the eastern seaboard, Milrose has helped billions of dollars worth of buildings to be built on time, in budget, and so forth. And typically we're working on the order of 3,000 projects at a time simultaneously, building a new skyscraper in New York, or remodeling a Macy's store or Madison Square Garden, or simply moving a sprinkler head in this conference room. Any of those things require a long, complex compliance and inspection and reporting and documentation process that makes Milrose's work of code and zoning consulting and the fulfillment of all of those compliance processes intrinsic to the building trades and very, very complex. To fulfill all of those internal needs, we chose, as a part of our Lean Agile business transformation, which we kicked off in 2013, the Salesforce platform, along with the Financial Force accounting component, as the basis for what we call our Wave business platform. So we created this business platform using this tool set, and we really think of Salesforce and Financial Force, TerraSky, SkyVisualEditor, and other components as a tool set for us to work on process development, process automation. And what we've ended up with is pretty interesting. We just received the Financial Force Award, the Customer 360 Award yesterday for business breakthrough, because what we've created is now approaching 20 million lines of custom Apex code, thousands of custom Visualforce pages, and many of those are assisted by the TerraSky visual editor that we'll talk about. Many custom objects and so forth, all creating the ability for us to manage and track and automate this complex work that represents all these different stakeholders. So for Milrose, even the question of who's the client gets to be complex, because on a building project, that can be the architectural firm, that can be the building owner, that can be the building representative, that can be the engineering firms, and so forth. And what we do is essentially facilitate the collaboration of all those different parties around a project, and we do that 3,000 projects at a time. I won't go through all the details of the service. This is in the deck if you're interested, and you can certainly look at milrose.com to see some more information on it. But effectively what we've done is taken a combination of consulting and fixed bid fulfillment services and put together an array of about 2,500 different services that Milrose offers to our clients, depending on what municipality the building project is governed by. And coming from that complexity, we really had to combine an amazing set of requirements from these kinds of demanding clients. So Milrose has a few thousand clients. Many of the clients that we have are very recognizable names, including Salesforce, and Facebook and Google and all of those sorts of new technology companies, as well as all of the traditional banking, financial services, media companies, and so forth. Pretty much anybody that represents a significant holding in real estate on the Eastern Seaboard is a client. And they're used to operating with enterprises. So Milrose is a small business on the order of a couple of hundred people in the organization. But we need to be able to be adaptable and flexible and do business at the speed of our client and in the format that these large enterprise organizations are used to. Let's see. There we go. So, what were the challenges? Specific to this conversation, among the many challenges we had to deal with, was a really interesting one, the tough challenge of business forms. Now, that sounds like it should be simple. And if you're familiar with the Salesforce platform, there's some rudimentary capability there. Again, as Alex pointed out, the simple two-column format and some of the other things that Salesforce offers out of the box suffice for certain kinds of forms. But in our case, Milrose has to deal with literally hundreds of different municipalities and other governing agencies, each one of whom issues dozens to hundreds of their own forms and requires all of us to operate on those forms. If you think about it, New York Department of Buildings, for example, and the bureaucracy, the paper-based processes that has to represent and the way it has to be governed, it gives you a sense for the fact that every day we're working on hundreds of different forms, all very complex forms, and absolute compliance is mandatory. It's not close, it's not good enough, it has to be perfect, and in some cases, this is health and human safety. Elevators and cranes and structures really have to be very, very meticulously managed. So we've got some forms that have over 2,000 actionable fields on one page. If you think about it, it's a mind-boggling complexity in terms of dealing with all these forms, multi-page forms, forms that have business logic built in, and so forth, and tracking those end-to-end throughout the fulfillment process. So what to do? We needed a flexible solution, and we needed to be able to display these in a way that our users could actually very quickly, very easily, and very visually interact with these forms and be able to deal with all of that complexity all day long without fatigue, with good engagement, and so forth. So this is where the story gets interesting. We have put together a development team of 25 developers, lots of capability in terms of development, and about halfway through our development cycle, we were starting to work with our users and test usability and that sort of thing. And what we had to do as a result of their feedback was to literally scrap the approach that we had been taking to the management of electronic forms. We were trying to work within the bounds of Salesforce, trying to sort of build around the limitations of that Salesforce UI. And what we found was that our users just flatly rejected that approach. It wasn't going to work. So what to do? Well, we were either faced with building literally thousands of Visualforce pages from scratch in detail to model each and every one of those forms, or find some other solution. So it was interesting. We were at the New York event for Salesforce in December of 2013, and looking around the App Exchange, looking everywhere for technology help in solving this problem as we began to contemplate the daunting task of building our own pages from scratch to do this. And happily, I happened to be walking through the exhibit floor there and leaned on a podium to check a message on my phone and looked up at the sign that was on the podium. And the sign said, TerraSky SkyVisualEditor, WYSIWYG forms made easy. And it's like, what? It's incredible. So Tony was there. We started talking about, well, can you do this? Can you do that? All these demanding requirements. And we built a fantastic collaboration at the engineering level very quickly and determined how to re-architect that portion of our solution, how to carve out the pieces that we had been working on the hard way and integrate Visual Editor in such a way that we could create what we call our forms factory. So our team is an offshore team, Eastern European development team. We created within that team a small group of people, 3 people, who could actually create, in our case, over 400 forms in 90 days. That was something that was incomprehensible in terms of trying to do it as straight up Visualforce page development. And so we met our go live date of July 1st with these forms. So we went from a developer having to literally reproduce a form that looks like this and many more complex as a web page, if you will, from scratch, to using the SkyVisualEditor editing tool, as Alex pointed out, the way the tool suite works. Very simple design, drag and drop structure on top of the image. So in our case, we need to start with the image of the master form or the target form produced by the authority, in this case, New York Department of Buildings, and then create something that's actionable throughout that whole thing. That can populate that form automatically with a significant amount of data, and then can also deal with the variability. So, for example, on this form, you can see, well, it's straightforward to use this tool to drag and drop and create that page. But now we have to be able to populate that page with signatures. Sounds simple, right? In this case, we have forms that can handle up to 8 different signatories with 40 or 50 different roles. And so our users need to have this kind of user experience capability where you see down the middle there, that pick list is the roster, we call it, the different roles within a given project that our user, our project manager, can quickly visually pick out who needs to be the signatory on this particular form and in what role, and then automatically populate that form visually on the screen as they watch to be able to see what does that image look like, what does the form look like, did I miss anything, double check everything to make sure they've got it in the right place, and then generate the artifact, we call it. And that may be a PDF, that may be a hard copy that then gets circulated for physical wedding signatures and seals. If you think about the old school way to notarize a document with that paper press seal thing, many jurisdictions still require that for licensed architects or licensed engineers, that kind of thing. So these are controlled documents beyond a contract. They might involve safety inspections of concrete samples or something like that. So our system can then keep track of every one of those and manage that whole process end to end. And we wouldn't have been able to do it anywhere near in the time frame, anywhere near within the budget, or the maintainability had we not serendipitously discovered TerraSky and the Visual Editor tool. And now we've been working together as an engineering team, making improvements to that tool, suggesting ideas, and I have to say that the TerraSky team has been incredibly responsive and helpful and proactive in making it straightforward to engage that solution as an integral part of our Wave business platform. So it's exciting to have the results and to be able to talk about it in a forum like this, recognized by Financial Force and others, and we look forward to a long partnership with TerraSky in improving the product even further.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. So now we're going to pass it over to Tony. He has about 8 minutes to go over just a brief demo, and then we'll take some questions. And just before we hop into that, quick reminder, we're in booth 2133 in Moscone North. If anybody has any more specific questions that they'd like to talk through with us, please stop by. So, Tony?
All right. Okay, so we're going to try and run this one-handed, so give me a moment. Oh, thank you. Teamwork. This is good. All right. So what we've got here is TerraSky is really kind of two portions. You would download the App Exchange package into your organization, and then once it's in your org, you can log into our design studio to actually begin creating these pages, like you've seen Alex and Michael talk about in the presentations. So the way that you would actually start by building a page is you would click File, and then load your page layout. It's going to ask you which object you'd like to use as the foundation for your new page. So it can be a standard or a custom object. At which point we read in your record types that you have in your existing organization. So you're going to choose a foundation to build upon at that point, and go ahead and click Open. And what we do is we load in all of your standard fields, your custom fields, all the custom relationships you've built inside of your organization. You don't have to be a developer to understand how to use the platform. There we go. So not to yell so much. So you don't have to be a developer to truly understand how to use the platform. It's really designed for an admin, like Alex's situation, where you don't have any of that development background, but if you have a team of developers like Michael does in his situation, we have elements of our tool that expose all of that custom code where you can go in and truly customize that to your heart's content. So let me, I guess, collapse that area. What we're going to do is make a couple of rapid changes that are very difficult to make on the Visualforce side if you were hand coding this, or if you're on the business side of things that your users have been asking for all the time, and you haven't been able to fulfill those requests because you didn't have the development background to make that happen. So the first thing is, a majority of the time we hear that customers don't like the limitation of 2-column views in Salesforce. It's pretty unanimous across the board. So what we can do is we can select a section, and then on the right-hand side of the studio, there is a property called columns. So you can increase that property to a 3 or a 4, and then as we scroll this section over to the right-hand side, you now have a 3rd and a 4th column to begin adding your fields onto the canvas. So I can simply drag my fields from left to right, and it's going to operate very similar to the page layout editor in Salesforce, with the exception of at the end, you are going to be producing a Visualforce page. So once you're done modifying these different columns by dragging them and dropping them into the appropriate spots, we now can organize the content in ways that makes the flow of the page more user-friendly. So we often hear that users don't like having to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page to find the related content that they need. So one of the things that we can do is on the left-hand side, we have a component palette with a large number of components. We can add a tabular view into the canvas. So this allows you to place sub-tabs inside of your Visualforce pages where you can organize your content in ways that are very meaningful to your users. One of the things that I'll do in this case is I'm going to take this first tab and I'm going to rename this my contact data so that the user knows exactly what they're looking at inside of the tab. Then what I can do is I can scroll down to the bottom of this page layout that you had generated inside of Salesforce previously. I can grab my contact related list and drag that up inside of this contact tab and drop it right in. So now the user knows exactly where we're going to find that related list of content, and then we can even take this one step further. There's a lot of data entry that has to happen in Salesforce, and usually when you have related records, you have to open up several screens to enter that data. Well, with SkyVisualEditor, we can actually allow you to create the main record and all of its related content on a single page, drastically streamlining the data entry process in your Salesforce org. So one of the things that you'll do in this situation is if I want to enter my contact records at the exact same time as my account records, I can simply remove the full name by right-clicking and deleting, and then inserting in a first and the last name in its place to add in all of the required fields that are necessary. So the way I can do that is we have a field bank on the left-hand side, and then I'm going to choose my contact object from this drop-down menu. I'll filter this by name, and then I'm just going to drag my first name onto the canvas and last name onto the canvas. And once those required fields are on the page, if you notice there's an add button right here, the user can now add in those records in line, and it's going to adhere to all of the security standards that are part of your organization. So it drastically streamlines that process. Maybe another quick example would be, much like Alex's use case where you've got the panel grids in place, you want to replicate the look of Excel. All you have to do is drag on the panel grid onto the canvas. It asks you the number of rows and columns you'd like to have. So input all that data in, and then click OK. And as you do this, it's going to generate a section that looks like Excel. So you have the same functionality of being able to merge cells, group the data, and organize in any way that you like there. And then the third and final thing that we'll show is how many of you, just a show of hands, have had users in your organization ask you for content to dynamically be shown or hidden based on user interaction? Okay, so quite a few of you, right? So what we'll do in this particular case is I want to hide the address information based on the account type being selected. So if a certain value is present, then show a section, in this case address information, and if it's absent, keep that information hidden because it's not relevant to the user at this time. So the way we can do that is I'll add in this address information in tab 3, and what we can do is on the right-hand side, there's a section called display settings. So in the display settings, if you notice here, we have conditional settings. I then can specify the properties so that when account type is equal to, let's say, prospect, that this section will show. And if that equation, that particular field, that business rule is not true, then keep that section hidden. So again, you're not having to code and develop all of that in the back end. We do all that heavy lifting for you. You're just setting up all the business rules and processes. But if you do have a development team who really wants to get in there and handle a bunch of proprietary coding that your company needs, we do have sections for extending out with Apex classes, with JavaScript, and with CSS inside of our platform as well. So you can really get in there and customize this as much as you need. And then one final thing is, I know that we've heard a lot today at Moscone North that people don't like the Salesforce coloring on the different tabs. So you can, on the right-hand side, change your color themes to match whatever you need for your internal branding. So this is great for things like Salesforce communities, Force.com sites. If you need to completely overhaul the look of Salesforce, you're welcome to do that as well. So for this, I'll just change this one to a dark blue, and then this one will just change to a dark red. Once this is done and you're finished modifying your page, all we have to do to get this in Salesforce is click File, Deploy. It's going to ask you if you're in Sandbox or Production. So in this case, I will choose Developer Edition and click Deploy. And what we do is we will create your Visualforce page, your Apex controller, and all of the code coverage that goes along with it. So these are fully ready to be deployed directly into a production environment without having to go in and reverse engineer what we do. It's all ready to be deployed out and publicly used. So once it's done being deployed, you're going to be shown the different pages that are created, as you can see here, and I can go ahead and click Open. So this is the page we made in literally just 7 minutes, and as you can see across the top, we have the blue banner with the 4 columns. We have the contact data, where I can click the Add button and add the contact records that are associated with it in line. I have the Excel grid inside of tab number 2, and inside of tab number 3, there's no data. But as soon as I change this drop-down menu to prospecting, there's that dynamically rendered content there. And again, all this without coding. So we're really trying to empower users to develop the pages very quickly and very easily. So with that, I guess we can open up for Q&A.